The unimaginably horrific Syrian massacres are making headlines around the world, but are we actually getting the full truth? Well, Jeff King, president of International Christian Concern, joins us now. Jeff, are we getting the full picture of what's happening in Syria?
Raj, I got to tell you, that is a great question. And you are the first journalist to ask me that question. I've done tons of interviews on this. Look, the news is largely coming out. It's coming from HTS, which is the force that was attacking the Alawites and the Christians. And it's coming from, and this is the former Al Qaeda and ISIS group, right? That's who these fighters are. And then the news is largely coming from Al Jazeera. Now, they're owned by the Qataris. The Qataris are major funders of Hamas. So the odds are we are not getting the full truth.
So, what should we know about HTS? The Jolani was the creator of Jabhat al-Nusra, and all these names get swirled around for people. You and I have obviously spent a lot of time in the Middle East talking about the Middle East, but help us understand what actually is the goals of HTS with Syria.
Yeah. So the simple way I explain it to people is that this is former ISIS, former Al Qaeda fighters, and that's the deal. That's truly it. They rebranded, they reformed, and they're supported by Turkey. And Turkey is like a temporary friend to NATO, but they are a jihadist force in the shadows. So that's who these guys are. They cannot be trusted. They gained a certain amount of power in the country, or a certain amount of geography in the country. And next thing you know, they're saying, "Hey, we are the government of Syria," and the Europeans are lining up and saying, "Yes, sir. How? Tell us about your needs and how we can help." Maddening.
Hmm.
But the Israelis know who these guys are. We know who these guys are. But very, very dangerous force, and they are no friend to the Alawites, the Christians, or anybody else. They're radical Islamists.
Well, that leads into my next question because I think a lot of folks initially thought that this was a massacre of Christians, but as it turns
Yes,
out, it was mainly against the Alawites. But the
right.
Christians are still endangered. Christians have been killed. Can you clarify for us what the status is of Christians in the western part of Syria?
Yeah, it's kind of a wait and see. So it's like I said, HTS, they are very savvy because they've got Turkey intel advising them. This is almost a proxy war by Turkey. And so Intel was in there from Turkey. They're advising him, so they come out first thing and say, "My gosh, it's a new day, and we're not bad people anymore." So anybody who believes that, you've got to be kidding me. So the Christians they're also in this area where the Alawites, where this recent attack happened, but they're also throughout kind of the northwest. But I would say they're in danger. It's this situation's not going to get better before it gets worse. And it's these guys are no friend to Christians. They ran Christians out of huge Christian areas in Iraq. So the same will probably happen, and my organization is. It looks like we're starting to work on some things. Pretty complicated. Obviously, can't say anything, but yeah, they should be in danger.
Okay, this is a question I think for clarification for a lot of people from a more general perspective, which is this is your job. You've dedicated your life to this in a lot of ways. Can you help us just understand the experience of Christians in the Middle East at large, basically since the Arab Spring?
Oof. Well, I remember probably like you do, in the Arab Spring, where the press was like, "What a great day for democracy, and this is going to be wonderful. Oh my gosh, this is so needed." And I'm like, "This is the Arab winter. This is not the Arab Spring." Anybody who knows how things work, and what you saw was the Brotherhood was released in Egypt, but the Christians are marginalized. So fundamentalist Islam says to subjugate all religions, and they have special rules. So they've subjugated. Most of their territory has been subjugated by the sword. But they have a special class for citizens, and you can exist kind of as a not a slave, fourth class citizen, and then you have to cough up, protection money. and then you have to bow to the Muslims and do all kind. It's just total humiliation. And so over the years, that has really hollowed out or created a big dividing line in the Christian community. I'm talking over 1,000 years. So many left. They said, I can't take this, and they said, okay, I'm going to be a Muslim. And then more recently, with the Arab Spring, with the Iraq War, with Syria, the Middle East has emptied of Christians, Raj. I'm trying to remember the figures. You might know too, but I think Iraq was 1.5 million Christians. Now maybe 150, and Syria is somewhat the same. So the Christians have voted with their feet. They've said, "Look, this does not work for us. We are not safe here. We're not welcome." And it's really a shame because they're a moderating force. Look at Lebanon; they are a moderating force. Um, so it's just the future is not bright. And as a Christian, as a student of prophecy too, if the Lord is sovereign, you have to wonder what's going on because the Christians are being removed from this area.
Hmm. Okay, so I guess a two-part, maybe final question
Yeah.
is: as the president of International Christian Concern, um, what can we be doing? I feel like we're just so powerless over here, and I live in San Diego. You're in DC. I'm sure folks are watching this, and wherever they might be, Australia, UK, or Florida, and they think to themselves, "Who am I? What can I actually do about this?" So that's the first part of this question, or maybe the second part. What can we do about it?
Yeah.
But then, how bad is Christian persecution, or are we kind of overblowing this thing globally?
Yeah. Well, if you listen to certain people, it's all a scam. And what are with the Christians? Why are they always whining like this? So maybe I'll reverse it. So Christian persecution is near an all-time high. There's over 200 million Christians that are persecuted. When I say persecuted, I mean there's a spectrum, right? So there can be job discrimination. Well, guess where that's landed? That's come to our shores. So, and there's maybe you'd call it social distancing, where we're pushed into a corner, we're hidden, and we're canceled. So that's very low persecution. But then that goes up to, torture, murder, imprisonment, horrendous rape. Oh my gosh, young girls being stolen from their families and raped and forcibly married and abducted into another religion. So that's the spectrum. That's what goes on. And it used to be the communist countries. That's where the persecution was coming from. But that's really morphed. Once the oil shock of the 70s and 80s happened, and the wealth of the world flowed into the Middle East, and they sent that around the world, and they created terrorist forces. They radicalized the Muslims of the world. They planted radical mosques everywhere. So all this has had a terrible effect. And so the radical Muslims, fundamentalist Muslims, that's the source of most of the persecution today. That's discounting China because that's old communist. But apart from that, these guys are the big players. And as far as what to do, the first thing I'd say is to follow the news. And you can follow persecution.org or go to one of the other great organizations, but just follow so you understand, first of all, what's going on and where it's happening. And then typically you want to do old school. You want to get on and talk to your representative. You want to send a letter, send an email. That's not that influential. If you send a letter, it really gets attention, and just say, these people need to be protected. What are you doing about this situation? And politicians like to stay in power, so they respond to the needs of their constituents and their wishes. And then get involved in terms of direct aid. We've supported Christians in Syria for years. We've done a lot of rebuilding there. Afghanistan, et cetera. We've sent scriptures, thumb drives into North Korea. We broadcast in North Korea. But anyway, so get involved in funding and helping when we have to rebuild lives.
Well, Jeff, this has been very informative, and obviously we're going to have you back on. Jeff, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Raj.